Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Is there more to ancient obelisks than meets the eye? Why did the ancients associate certain places with the gods? And how did they move all those big rocks? Well, welcome to the 974th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube, and via TuneIn.com. I'm Paul, flying solo today because Ben and his wife are taking a well-deserved day off in Boston. Returning to the show today via Skype is Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. You've seen him on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, The Real 4400, The Abduction Diaries, and many more shows. And he's the author of Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials, and the Holy Bible, A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness, and most recently, The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing, The Power of Affirmative Prayer. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, Michael earned his Master of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City in 2000. He has been a hospital chaplain, has served Unitarian Universalist congregations, and most recently moved to North Carolina to continue his ministry there. And I'm blessed to be able to call Michael a close personal friend. So, as Ben would say, Reverend Michael Carter, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Hey, brother. Listen, we were chatting before the show. I remembered, please give Ben a big hug, because I've missed him the last two times. He was away last time I was on.
Yeah, I know. It's
just how it works out, but I miss seeing him.
Well, we're going to correct that. We'll get him in some of our private calls, too.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
okay.
Good Thanksgiving. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, my friend. So in one form or another, there are ancient stone obelisks all over the world. Is there more to them than meets the eye?
Well, I'm going to say yes, because I'm one of those people. There's more to everything than meets the eye. They're located in some places: London, New York, Istanbul, Washington D.C., of course, Cairo, Rome, and Paris. And I was always intrigued by. I have some here. They're just replicas of ancient Egyptian obelisks. Obviously the phallic, the structure, the way they're built, they look like rocket ships. It's interesting. I think there's something that resonates in the human psyche or the human unconscious with this form, with this shape. A lot of civilizations say there's something sacred. There is something sacred about them. They're reaching skyward, they're towards the gods, if you will. And again, because so many cultures have them, if you see it or hear it once or twice, maybe coincidence, but that's not the case when we're talking about the obelisks. One of the most, I took some notes, one of the most famous ones, obviously Egyptian and Washington, but the Axum obelisk in Ethiopia. It stands 79 feet tall, 79 feet tall. It weighs 160 tons. It was built from one solid block of granite. I don't know. Graham Hancock says that just because you can't figure out how it was done, you can't say it was extraterrestrial.
Well, exactly.
So my response to Brother Graham was, but you can't say it's not either. But and what's fascinating about there's no mortar. So you're wondering what is the technology there? As history has it, a gentleman by the name of King Izana built the obelisk in the 4th century. Again, 160 tons, and it stood in place for over 1,000 years. You want to talk about durability, and Axum flourished as the center of power and wealth. You don't hear about it as much, and it was initially erected, this particular one, to mark the tombs of royalty and of important leaders. There were about 50 obelisks erected in the city at the very beginning when they were building it. What's fascinating, again, is that they were built without the use of mortar, and so from the early 4th century, talking about Oxum now, until the 10th century BCE, Oxum was one of the greatest powers on earth. I had no idea. It was a trade route between Persia and Iran. Well, Persia is modern-day Iran, and Rome. And what else I found out about it was that it was a pagan kingdom. It wasn't a Christian kingdom at all. So we get back to this thing about the obelisk and what they mean, or what they did mean to the ancients.
Well, one of the speculations that I've heard, and with all due respect to ancient aliens, I think occasionally they do a little reaching. But, anything's possible.
Yeah.
There was some speculation by a number of people that because of the stone, the makeup of some or all of the stone obelisks anyway, that they were communication devices. You could use piezoelectricity, as it's called, to create some sort of electromagnetic field or something along the lines of what Nikola Tesla was working on in the late 1890s, early 20th century. Excuse me, for sort of sending electricity through the air. So what say you on that? I mean, is that...
It's interesting. I mean, like you said, anything is possible. What I find a little bit intriguing is that, here we are in Ethiopia, where allegedly, don't know, the Ark of the Covenant is there, and that was used as a communication device with Yahweh.
Yeah.
Right? And so it would not be too far-fetched to say that these individuals, this civilization, knew the secrets to this kind of technology. Well, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, they're both right in Ethiopia, and the Ark of the Covenant, I think we could argue, at least circumstantially, there's enough circumstantial evidence to say that this was a communication device to be in contact with Yahweh as an astronaut. I mean, that's why he said that he wanted them to use this. Yeah. I mean, what gets me though is, what they symbolize. It's what it symbolizes. Humankind's, it's a common root for all of us. That's, like the Tower of Babel, right? I'm not saying the Tower of Babel was an obelisk, but it had to be some kind of obelisk in a way, and it's shaped like a rocket. There's something about its form that appears to the human psyche. Many of our own skyscrapers, right? I mean, I was in New York before I was there during 9/11, and there's something about, there was a resemblance. There's something about it expresses power and might. It demonstrates a closeness to the gods, and of course, rulers use this for their advantage. And I'm thinking that perhaps these obelisks resonate to us, like humankind. We're always looking upward. We're always reaching upward. We're always, it's something fundamental to the human condition. And that to me is very, I'm just curious about that. As far as, the technological aspects of it, I think that any conclusion we come to about them lends more credence to communicating with the gods, using this godlike technology. If it's true what you're saying, that they were in touch with this energy that Tesla in the 20th century was toying with and playing with, A, where are they getting the knowledge, and B, what does that say about really how advanced these civilizations were?
Well, before we leave the subject, well, actually, no, you're right. I think it's easier to conceive of ancient technology when we think of history as, and we've talked about this before, cyclical rather than linear. In other words, instead of going from power tools, or I should say stone tools to power tools just once over a million and a half year period, most of which is empty, we know nothing about it. As many indigenous peoples, and particularly the American Southwest, say, we've done that at least 4 times.
Yes.
So
yes.
Inherited technology from previous civilizations that were technologically advanced, not necessarily spiritually advanced, but I think it could help explain and any inheritance that even our ancestors might have had in that regard. Now it's funny. Before we leave the subject of the Ark, I had a seminary classmate from Ethiopia, and we were pretty good friends. And the Ethiopian Christians tend to be Orthodox, so I said, his name was Elias, and I said, Elias, why is it that all the Ethiopian churches have little models of the Ark of the Covenant in them? And this is in the 70s, before anybody knew anything about Aksum, widely. And he said, oh, well, that's easy because it's in Ethiopia. Yes. And he knew the monk who guards it.
Yes.
And I could tell you the whole story. It's not really, but he said the Ark had killed 2 people in living memory who tried to sneak into the chapel to see it, according to him. So I think we really have a point when we're talking about electrical power or communication, whatever, when it comes to things like the Ark. But getting back to the obelisks, and I'm going to get to a question here from our friend Peter in South America shortly. But I can't help but notice that on top of most of these obelisks is a little pointy thing that looks like a pyramid. And then you got the big pyramids that people talk about. So here's a question from Peter in Bogota, Colombia. Please ask Reverend Carter. I have a question about a relative of the obelisk, the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The true purpose of the Great Pyramid remains a mystery to this day. What theory do you favor and why?
I favor, great question. I grew up, and it was the tombs. They were tombs of the pharaohs. Yep. And I don't know, I don't think I really bought that, but that's what I was taught. I do think that it was used for multiple events. I do think that it housed some type of technology, and that the energy there was considered sacred. I do believe that, there were initiation rites and what have you that took place there. But I also believe that they had the knowledge of how to harness electricity. David Childress, I think, talks about this in one of his earlier books.
Yes.
Technology of the Gods or some title like that. I do think that, because I'm feeling that they were, and just from my research, I do happen to agree that they were in touch with off-world intelligences. They were so advanced. And that this was more than just, we're going to build a nice funeral building for Ramses or whoever the pharaoh was at the time. I also tend to think, though I can't prove it, that it is a mystery, but I think people really do know what it's for now, but they're not letting that out to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, because the guy, what was the Egyptian brother who was in charge of all the antiquity, Hawass?
Yes.
He was very, very conservative in his worldview about what these were for. I mean, he stuck to the party line, and I get it. But some of it just, I couldn't wrap my mind around.
Yeah. You still see him here and there on television shows.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
he was the minister of antiquities.
And he's still, parroting the party line.
Yeah. Well, it's safe to do that, I guess. One of the things, too, that's interesting is there is one, I guess you can call it an obelisk, in India that's made of iron. It's in central India, and it never rusts. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I didn't know about this one, but yeah, that's again, it's what kind of technology is this?
Yeah.
Where are you getting this? And that it never rusts. I mean, after a while, you just have to say, they were either in touch with or had the knowledge about how to use these materials. And some of them we're still dumbfounded by today.
So do you believe
Our scientists, archaeologists.
Well, that's true. Regarding communications in the ancient world, I think we now know that what we refer to as prehistory, there was world trade going on.
Yes.
It wasn't like today, but I mean, people, I think our ancestors were not dumb at all. If they were, they wouldn't have survived. And regardless of where they got the technology for anything they did, there certainly was, you can almost island hop from Scandinavia, to Iceland, to Greenland, to Newfoundland, which apparently at least the Vikings did.
The Vikings did that.
Yeah. And I know that here in Rhode Island, coal, or I should say in Greenland, coal has been found that came from a coal mine, ancient coal mine in Rhode Island. So
wow.
You've obviously got stuff going on that doesn't fit the old-time narrative of people being isolated from one another.
Yes, and this is what's, I think as we go forward, we're going to get a lot more of this kind of stuff, and there's going to be a lot more pushback, because basically what's happening is history is being rewritten.
Yes.
And if you are vested in the old narrative, we talked about that before the show, if you're a tenured professor or if you're an Orthodox minister or a priest and all this new material is coming in, yes, it's very human to push back. But we're finding that what we were taught was true is not, or it's only partially true. Well, and so people are seeing the world that they knew. It's like a tremble. It's trembling under their feet because what they built their beliefs on and what we've built our knowledge and erudition on is being challenged.
Well, it's true with discoveries that cannot be denied, that have been made by tenured professors and people with PhD academics, such as Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Yes.
This ancient site that is at least 10,000 years old, probably 12,000 or more, built by a civilization we never heard of before.
Yes.
With art like we've never seen, things of this kind. And again, it's something that is pushing human history further back.
Yeah. And they've got drawings with people with these giants, people with 6 fingers, which goes back to Genesis. You know what I mean? And it's really, really an exciting time. And we're finding out more about, they call it polydactylism, where you're born with 6 digits or more.
Yeah.
And there's an ancient stele where a mother is talking about, what should I do with my child? They have 6 fingers. I mean, and then you go back to the biblical text about in Genesis and Genesis 6 and this giant race. It's really pushing the boundaries and rewriting history as we know it. And it cannot be taken. Who was it? Was it Victor Hugo? Nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And I think as we go forward, 23, 24, as we move forward into this 21st century, there's going to be a lot of rethinking done about what we thought was set in stone. I was thinking when you were talking about, Paul, the spiritual aspect with the technology, and I don't know why. Sometimes I go back over stuff. So the last few weeks I've been going back over this Eisenhower alleged meeting with the 2 races of extraterrestrials and the Grenada Treaty, or the Greada Treaty. And, it's so, it's that choice. It's and I get it. I wouldn't have wanted to have to make the decision if all this is true. When the Nordics say, listen, you guys are splitting the atom. This is not okay. We will make a treaty with you, and give this up, and we'll show you how to grow spiritually. And then maybe you get the toys. I don't know if they said that, he says no. We can't do this. We live in a dangerous world. We need to do this. I think, and then 10 days later, the U.S. conducted a nuclear test. And then this group of Greys come along, and allegedly, the story, we make this treaty if we, as long as they let us know who they're taking and that kind of thing. But when you cut away the fat and spit out the bones, it's the choice that we make individually and collectively. Do I go for the material? Do I live my life based on that? Or, and I'm talking about for nations and individuals, or do I follow the spiritual path? It doesn't mean I can't have the other stuff, but I'll be able to use it in a wise manner. I'll be able to use it without maybe hurting or destroying myself and everyone with me. And that's the parable, isn't it? That's what we have to go through each day. Which choice are we going to make? And Eisenhower, again, if this is true, we're living the results of the choices he made.
Well, that's a rather profound way to look at it, and I agree 100%. That brings up issues that maybe takes us a little farther away from obelisks, but do these extraterrestrials, if that's what they are, extra-dimensionals or people from other times or whatever, would they treat us and do they treat us as equals? Equals enough to make treaties with. And to me, well, you know me, I tend to be very, I question everything, right?
Sure.
And I did that in the seminary. It didn't necessarily endear me to certain faculty members. But anyway, the question remaining, I mean, do we want to be associated with people who have nifty flying objects, or do we want to be associated with people who have moral and spiritual advancement, which maybe they can go together, as you say. But the question is, can we trust any of this? If there was ancient communications by objects or obelisks or whatever, and some of it was from extraterrestrials, were they manipulating? I mean, there's no way to know any of this. Or was it something that they were doing for their own benefit? Now, when we go into other countries and try and quote-unquote help people, and we do, particularly when disasters have occurred, there's always an agenda. That's the human thing.
Yes.
Any human leader will have an agenda. So, I mean, what say you about all that? I mean, if you really couldn't, if you were an ancient, you really couldn't trust what was happening around you with these weird people of weird technology, how are we today supposed to understand it?
Well, this is what I would say. For our ancient ancestors, they were just, it was shock and awe, man. I mean, these beings, the technology. I mean, they were gods.
Yeah.
They were godlike. So I get it. I'm thinking of today, though. Yeah, I go back to the wise rabbi, right? Yeshua, by their fruits you'll know them.
Yep.
If these folks come, if these Nordic or humanoid folks come to you and they say, look, we're not asking you for anything except that you cease and desist because you're playing with something that will destroy you. We've seen it happen.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay? And we're just saying we will teach you how to grow spiritually. And I don't know what the rest of the conversation was. Or maybe you get the toys later because you can handle it. Then I would kind of lean there because that's just that's just who I am. This group of Greys come along, and I'm not saying all Greys. This group of Greys comes along, and Ike allegedly says, if you read over, he says, how can we refuse you? You're so advanced. So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
We, at this point in history, yes, we're the most powerful nation on the earth. We just split the atom over 2 civilian cities. You want to talk about war crime, but that's something else.
Yeah.
What we can't do anything. So basically, I can't blame him. I can't blame him for that. I wish that they had come clean afterwards. So the Greys, this group of Greys says, we want to experiment. We want to do A, B, C, D. We'll let you know. We'll have whatever they told them. What are you going to do? You can't say no. Well, you're afraid to say no because these people are, they got 60th century technology.
Yeah.
So I get it. However, it did subvert the Constitution. You're making treaties without, talking. And I get the fear and civilization may collapse as we know it. I get that fear. But now, we're still facing the age-old conundrum. Slowly but surely, the government is, still controlling the narrative about whether these beings exist or not. But it's the age-old conundrum whether it's off-world intelligences or not. Do I chase the material? Do I chase the logical, rational? Do I chase the weaponry? Do I chase this, or do I go the other path where I can grow, where I can learn to maybe not necessarily compete with my neighbor, but cooperate? This, nations have this lesson, as do individuals. And when I look at that, as I say, when I look at that treaty, when I look at that story, it's that times have changed, but humanity hasn't, in the sense of it's the power, it's the glory, we're going to be the top nation in the world, and that's the path I'm going to go down. And a lot of time, fear can be rationalized as being pragmatic. We live in a dangerous world, and yes, we just, won another world war, but it's a dangerous world. That's fear.
Yeah.
And so these beings are saying, hey, but look what you're doing. Look what you're doing. You're gonna destroy yourselves, and we have to make those choices all the time. With Eisenhower, the self-righteous part of me when I first read it when I was younger. Oh, now I get it, but we're destroying ourselves. We're destroying this planet, and it's not that technology's like money. It's neutral. It's your attitude about it.
Well, on that note, let's take our mid-show break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, just Paul today, on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our great guest, Reverend Michael Carter, so stick with us.
We've unlocked the vaults, and we're replaying Casey Kasem's American Top 40, the 80s. This week is from December 5th, 1981. That's when Foreigner was waiting for a girl like you. Genesis got no reply at all. Barbra Streisand was coming in and out of your life. And Olivia Newton-John wanted to get physical. You'll hear those songs, all the top 40 hits, and the long-distance dedications from December 5th, 1981, right here on Casey Kasem's American Top 40, the 80s.
You can depend on us for public service, ON Radio.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on ON Radio, AM and FM. And we'll get back to our great guest, Reverend Michael Carter. You were seeing him on Ancient Aliens. And one little point, though, I just wanted to clarify that we're not intentionally bad-mouthing science. I think science...
No.
And it's disciplined thinking that it brings to subjects is very important, especially in fields like this. So we have great respect for it. But we get a little impatient with it from time to time.
Yeah, because science can become the new religion.
Exactly.
And science is you're supposed to be open to other theories and other perspectives. And if you close that off, if you write people off, whether it's Graham Hancock or Eric Van Donigan or whoever, then you're not being a scientist.
That's very true. Very
yeah,
true.
yeah. And so that's what I don't want science to become the new religion insofar as, where we just can't let any new information in. I'm threatened by it. It's going to take away from my work and that kind of thing. Then you have to be careful, because then it becomes an idol.
Exactly. Or I paid $100,000 for this degree, and you come in and question it.
Yes,
So,
I can't let that in. I can't let
human
any
nature.
new information in. And this is how culture formed. This is how, it's like a dysfunctional family. No new information gets in.
Yeah, that's it. So we're getting back to our ancient structures here, like obelisks. There's often great speculation about the tremendous weight of these things and how they were able to erect these things. They vary in size, but I think the largest one, I can't remember quite where it was, but it's only a base now. So the question of quarrying and carving, most of them are pretty perfect.
They are. Some of them you can't get a playing card in between.
Yeah, right. So
where's that technology? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I don't know, but I'm thinking of Easter Island with those big, great big statues, which are most of them buried halfway in the ground.
Right, they're underground. That's
everybody's
just the
saying, how the hey did they do this? But people don't think to ask the natives. Somebody finally did, and they said, well, this is how we did it. And as a matter of fact, they demonstrated. So I mean, again, I don't think we should shut off the possibility that people are pretty smart and figured out how to do it for themselves. But then again, there are, as you say, things that we couldn't do today without at least a lot of trouble. And the precision with which some of these things are carved, never mind erected, really makes you think. So what say you about all that?
Well, I say, like you mentioned something, like just now. I didn't know that natives, I think I had read that, but I can't, I'm going to say I didn't, that they can show you how to do it. But if you go back in some of the folklore, these natives, the people talk about beings coming down,
that's true.
Giants, helping them. And so, for so many years, we said, well, this was an exaggeration, but they're telling you that our ancestors did this, or they showed us how to do it, and we've written it off. But, I mean, there's no other rational way, and I'm just saying, if you want to just stick with left brain logic, there has to be some technology used. You can't say slaves did it. You can't say free people decided, we're going to help you put. I mean, these things weigh tons.
Yep.
So,
some of them.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm intellectually lazy, but it does make more sense of the ancient astronaut theory, at least, that okay, now we can see, because like you said, some of these things we can't replicate today with what we have, with the 21st century technology.
Now, one of the criticisms I've heard of that approach is that why would, assuming they're from other planets, why would they fly 20 billion light years to build stuff out of rocks? So sometimes I come back and say, well, rocks last, and they have certain properties that might have been useful. But I'm no expert in that. I'm not a geologist. I mean, what say you to that criticism? Why would they?
I say that they're not looking. They came to do more than that. It's not like they just flew down and let's put this here and then leave. They were showing people how to use astrology, astronomy, how to use iron, how to use tools, how to look at how to grow spiritually, how to deal with your neighbor. It wasn't just that. And I think that that's just the rationalist view. And besides, again, it's the Earth, it's our limited thinking. For them, maybe it's not 20 million light years. Maybe there's a wormhole. Maybe there's their technology. They weren't sweating, believe me. They weren't perspiring. They probably did this with lasers or what have you. But to say that that's all they came here to do, and also sometimes the truth is in front of your face, maybe they put that there to let people know that, hey, you're not all that.
Yeah.
That you're not alone. You're not ready to accept it yet. But we'll just leave a little something over here for you to ponder.
As we've talked about elsewhere, folklore is the vessel of the memory of the human race.
Yes.
And the stories, even jokes, or little things that come down, were born when something happened in human history that imprinted itself upon our psyches. One of these things, I think, is reflected maybe in the Greek myth of Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the god who came down and gave man fire, and maybe electricity, maybe, I don't know, Obelisks. I mean, who knows? But he got in all kinds of big trouble for that.
Yes, he did. He did.
And if you look through all the myths of ancient cultures, there were problems for the gods or whoever they were when they did certain things without authorization from the Most High. The biggest example most people know would be in Genesis with the Nephilim, the sons of God, quote unquote, taking wives among men and having children by them. Which,
So obviously there was no prime directive, or if it was, it was violated.
Yeah, it was just the opposite of the prime directive.
Yeah, and of course we could say with the Anunnaki as well, if you look at Sitchin's work, because, these gods were fighting each other according to him, and, human beings were fighting alongside of them, whether they were conscripts or not.
Right.
They took sides. But again, sometimes I look at the Book of Enoch.
Oh, obviously one of my ancestors.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, everybody's ancestor at this point.
And I say, Azazel and some Jezebel, the angels who rebelled, the 200 who came down. They took wives, carried on, but they also showed us, again, astronomy, astrology, how to work with dyes, healing stones, how to work with energy. They gave us some pretty good knowledge. My thing is, now, we could debate theologically whether there was a rebellion against God, maybe it was a rebellion against, this particular astronaut.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, and I'm being devil's advocate here, but is it so much that what they did was wrong, which it was, but we weren't ready. They showed us how to use weapons, iron and what have you. But we weren't ready for it. And so, fast forward to the Grenada Treaty, Eisenhower. You guys are playing with something that's not going to end well. You don't have the spiritual wisdom or maturity to do this. Well, looking back in hindsight, it's always 2020. Maybe this leader of these extraterrestrials, these astronauts, was saying, "Don't get involved. They're not there yet."
Very plausible.
They're not there yet, and there's going to be a heavy penalty. And they went down there, and you see it in the movies and whatever. The extraterrestrial comes down, or the foreigner comes down, or comes across. Maybe there's a war. They fall in love with one of the people that it's the stuff that movies and stories are made of. But it still comes back to the basic thing is that humankind at that level of their development was not ready for the knowledge.
Right. One of the, not to impinge upon the gravitas of our discussion here, but I remember in the 1990s, the boys and I, Ben and his older brother, would enjoy sitting down watching, I think it was a golden age of cartoons and also claymation, things of that kind, in the afternoons. And there was a show called Kablam, which is very little known. It had a lot of sort of variety, and then one of the episodes was Prometheus and Bob. And Bob was this blundering caveman, and Prometheus was this alien in a nifty uniform who came down in a flying saucer and gave Bob television and couches, birthday party. I think it was an absolute riot. And it turned Bob, in a way, seemed to have more common sense than Prometheus did. And once in a while, Prometheus's commander would show up, and I don't know, it struck me when we were talking about that I always have a canted view of this stuff. And if you can find it, I think it's on YouTube, Prometheus and Bob, I think it's absolutely a riot. So,
Wow.
So in any case, check that out if you have the time.
Yeah.
Another issue with, regardless of the communication that was going on, with aliens, if that's what they were, mating with human females, the DNA would have to be almost identical.
Well, remember, they were still toying with DNA as well. If we read Stitchin and what have you, there were many upgrades, if you will.
Yes, that's true. And just because our technology hasn't reached that yet doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Yeah. And so, there were upgrades and there were mistakes made, and we could look at centaurs and, mermaids. I mean, if those people really existed, which our ancestors did, they could have been just these intelligences touring around. Some of the gods of Egypt, some of them were half human, half crocodile. Some of them, Horus was a beak head and what have you. Maybe those things were real.
Yeah, and
touring. This is, but now we can entertain that. If you had said that 50 years ago, I'd be visiting you in a rubber room, or maybe I'd be in the next room with you. But now we can actually start, because we know now that there is technology out there. This whole thing about not being alone in the universe is making us rethink and rewrite everything. And getting back to the obelisks, what again, they're all like rocket ships. It's very obvious. I'm just saying. But they're going upward. The Tower of Babel is a tall, it was very tall. It was Stitchin says it was possible rocket ship. But there's something about it, and where the ground on which it is considered sacred.
Okay, so where?
So that means that energy that is around this, this is sacred ground. This is sacred ground where this obelisk is, where this is. They said the same thing about the pyramids, about some of the obelisks. Well, it was a memorial. Maybe it was. Whatever it was almost put there in reverence. To commemorate some individual, some being who was a leader. Now, it could have been a human being, a king, or a descendant of the gods. But I find that this is curious, that it's in this phallic rocket ship, as you mentioned earlier in the show. It's got the pyramid on top of it.
Yeah.
There's something more to it. And it may be just staring us in the face. But...
I think you've hit on an important point there, Michael, with the ground upon which these things sit. Were considered very often places of the gods.
Yeah.
And that's what the literature even says. And if communication were taking place, as in during the Exodus with the Ark of the Covenant being placed in a tent, Moses communicating with God through that. I mean, what's the difference in concept anyway?
Yeah. But what's so fascinating though is this intelligence tells them how to make the ark.
Right.
Okay.
You
want to keep in touch with me, Paul? Here's my number.
Yes. Well,
okay. You can just call me. I'm always going to be there. Give me a call. Here, take this gold. I want you to use the gold. Here's some these metals here. This is how you do it. There's so many qubits here, so many qubits. You got to be careful. There's a little radiation thing going on. You got to put on your breastplate and whatnot. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with tumors and boils and cancers.
Yeah.
I haven't created chemotherapy yet for you, so you got to be careful. I'm being facetious. But yeah. And they don't know, man. They're like, they're picking their nose. What, you don't touch it. Oh my God, you touched it. And then you fall down dead from shock. Well, you must have displeased Yahweh. I told you, man. I told you to be careful. They don't know. They don't know.
Well, in this is some years back, but I believe it was the University of Michigan, an electrical engineering class actually took the instructions for the ark out of the Bible and used it to
And
build
recreated it?
a replica
Yes.
of it. And the thing was dangerous. People would shock people and everything else. Now, I don't know whether they got it right, but they must have done something right, because it.
Well, hey, you told me two monks got killed. Your friend
in
told
Ethiopia
you.
from the real ark,
I
supposedly.
wouldn't want to guard it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it.
Well, my friend told me that they had, up until, I guess it was the early 19th century, they had used it in liturgical processions. But
Not
then
me.
it just deteriorated to the point where they couldn't. But whatever Wutsy had apparently stuck with it to those two guys who tried to sneak in to see it. Didn't have such good luck with that.
My God. Oh, my God.
But
I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. But there's a monk who was appointed for life to
Yes.
guard this, and that's still going on.
Yes.
So whatever's in there, I mean, they claim it's the Ark of the Covenant. There were other stories about its fate, but having known, this fellow, I think it's. I have no problem with believing that it's an Aksum. But again, there's another obelisk there, and as you said,
there's the big one that we just talked about,
Yeah.
and then there are like 50 or smaller ones.
exactly.
They found some at Göbekli Tepe. What is it? They found some obelisks there.
Göbekli Tepe, yep.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a symbol that is almost universal, and it is a rocket ship.
So where do you go from here with this research? I mean, where do you think research is going to go?
I think where it's going to go is to have us rethink everything we were taught about civilizations, about how our early ancestors worshiped. There's Karahan Tepe now, which is it may be a little older than Göbekli Tepe, but we don't know. But that's where they found all these things. People worship there. And we thought that it was mostly agriculture that we being, scholars and what have you. Of course, I'm not an archaeologist. We thought that maybe it was agriculture that brought people together. With Karahan Tepe, they're talking about it may have been worship. Not the way we know it, because they found some remnants of buildings there where people sat in a circle, and you could sit there. And then there's the astronomical a piece of this where they could calculate the solstices and what have you there.
Well,
This is rewriting everything we knew. We thought it was hunter-gatherers. Now, in some parts of the world, in Turkey, I don't want to generalize, but they're saying that it may not be hunter-gatherer or agriculture that brought us together. It may have been worship.
Well, speaking of which, I guess we can take sort of, as we'd say in theology, an apophatic approach to our subject. Why are there not obelisks at places like Stonehenge, or were there? Very important worship center, apparently.
It is. I don't know. Maybe there are and we don't know about. But here we go with Stonehenge. Look at that. Okay, maybe different cultures did it a different way. I mean, listen. When we look at the Bible, when he's wrestling with the angel, our brother, and afterwards he makes like a little altar, just stones on top of each other. This is where I wrestle with this angel. Yeah. This is sacred. Okay? This is sacred. Now, he couldn't move tons of stuff. He couldn't, he got a limp now. He's trying to, pull it together. But he's saying, this is holy ground here. This is sacred. When Moses is with Yahweh, and Yahweh says, hey man, you got to give me some respect. Take those shoes off. This is now holy ground. Now, it could have been because if you get any closer, you're going to die of radiation. It could have been that, but they wouldn't have understood that. And so they walk away, they being Moses, saying, this is where I met God. This is holy ground here. Maybe Stonehenge, I'm not saying there are no obelisks in that part of the world, but those stones are there. Maybe off-world intelligences put them there. But this is a memorial. Something happened here.
Yeah. Well, the things are still being found.
Right.
And speaking of Stonehenge, those rocks apparently were brought all the way from Wales, a quarry there. And so, I mean, again, how does that work?
How is this working? That's all. And I think at this stage of the game, the questions are more important than the answers.
That's true.
At this stage of the game, the answers may come, and they may not. But the questions are more. See, you couldn't ask these questions before without being labeled a troublemaker. It's like religion. When we're fighting Iraq and they're praying to their God and we're praying to our God, is God whose side is God on? You don't answer that. You don't ask that. That's trouble. Don't ask me that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the question is hanging in the air. Okay, and a good professor will say, "I don't know."
Yes.
Okay, but the questions are more important now. We're not saying that a gray or Nordic or a reptilian brought them over. We're just saying, how did they get from Wales to here? That's just the question.
Yeah.
No one's saying science is wrong or that. But see, that's the questions are important now.
Well, a lot of people, good people, are working on this. Now, you and I serve on the research committee of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Matter of fact, in the new book, we have chapters right next to each other.
Yes.
Which I think is cool.
Yeah.
So I think that there are, and we're among the few who don't have PhDs. There are professors, MDs, all sorts of people working on the issue of consciousness, the multiverse idea, things of this kind, and what implications it may have for, among other things, what we've been talking about today. So I think that there's a great sign of hope there. So, Michael, where can people find out more about you and get your books, etc.?
You can go to Amazon and just type in Reverend Michael J.S. Carter, and the book should show up. You can go to Barnes & Nobles. You can reach me at michaeljscarter@gmail.com. You can also go to my website, which is michaeljscarter.com. I respond to everything, so feel free. And I also have a web page, Reverend Michael J. Carter, on it's a fan page, but you can reach me on Facebook, or you can just type in Michael J.S. Carter. You'll find me, and tell me what you think. Very
good. Well, brother, it's always a great honor and pleasure to speak with you. We'll be speaking off the air. We have our famous personal Zoom calls.
Yes.
And we'll talk to you very soon. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, tell Dave I said hey, and thanks for having me. Stay well. You look great, man, and keep it up, and we'll be in touch.
Well, I don't hear that I look great very often. I'll take that as a great compliment.
We'll
be in touch very soon.
Okay, brother.
Okay.
Let's talk before Christmas.
Oh, absolutely.
Christmas. Okay.
I'll be in touch tomorrow.
Okay, I'll be here.
There's no getting away from me.
No, brother, I love it, and let's do it.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, let's get to some of our announcements here. Look for us at the New England Parafest in Kittery, Maine, on April 22nd, 23rd, 2023. Hard to believe that's coming up already. That event will kick off the week before that on this show on April 16th, when the event headliners will appear with us, some of us hopefully in the studio as we did last year. We'll be at the Para Expo 2023 aboard the USS Salem at Quincy, Massachusetts, May 19th to 21st. We'll be among the speakers that will broadcast, we hope, live from the ship on Sunday, May 21st. And other events in 2023 for which we or I will be present include the Exeter UFO Festival in New Hampshire in September and the Arizona Dowsers Conference in October. Visit our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can find over 1,100 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and right here, WON AM and FM. Also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Website also has a charity page with links to several good causes we have adopted because we know the people who run them, and the money goes where it should. So we especially want to thank our great producer and station manager today, Dave Richards, who's sitting in for Ben on the board today. Thank you so much, Dave. Next week, December 11th, Ben will be back, and we'll bring you an open line show to answer your questions on many, many paranormal subjects. We leave you today with a thought from our favorite 13th century philosopher and theologian, Rumi. When setting out on a journey, do not seek advice from those who have never left home. I'm Paul Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Blackstone Valley's